Hey Chuck, so today I want to talk to you about common pitfalls for parts managers, something that I don't think we talk about enough. And so my first question is, what are some of the most common pitfalls of a parts manager, mistakes that they make?
In our experience, it's lack of training.
Is
You
that
know, I
their
believe,
fault though? Is it their
what's that?
fault? Is it their
Well,
fault?
it's not really their fault. Most parts managers, myself included, became parts managers because basically they were organized or good people in the parts department understood it really well, like top parts advisor or whatever. And the parts manager, for whatever reason, leaves, gets fired, whatnot, and they go, "You're our most logical choice. We're just going to throw you into the fire." Then after that, and a lot of times when I do seminars, I have yet, in the hundreds of seminars I've done, and I've asked this question, is I have yet to find one parts manager that went to college to become a parts manager at a car dealership. We all have, we're all alumni of UHK, University of Hard Knocks. We've learned it. And, for myself, I found out I really enjoyed it. It was a challenge, and I enjoyed the variety of learning all the different hats I had to wear as a parts manager and trying to perfect each hat.
Because
But of
I
course,
think
it took time.
parts managers tend to be perfectionists, right? And they like
Oh, absolutely.
order.
I
Um,
always, always, and Kaylee, you've heard me say this 100 times, that most parts managers tend to be antisocial control freaks, and I used to be one of them. And so, with that being said, that's typically, and we see this day in and day out with the clients we work with, lack of education and training.
how can
Especially,
they get more education and training?
well, listening to these podcasts, so to speak, or some of the webinars we do or whatnot. We've got the educational links on some of the common things, inventory control mainly, price matrixing.
Okay, wait.
They're, yeah,
So with inventory control, what's the number one thing that you see mistake that parts managers make? Just
properly
one thing.
receiving and selling out parts,
Okay,
their
clarify.
special order process.
Special order process. Okay, so what's wrong with the special order process that you've seen?
Well, and again, this leads to how the dealership works with it, and what I mean by that is, and of course I used to struggle with it all the time as well, is who's going to get the customer back in? I mean, when it comes to your wholesale special orders or whatnot, you're in control for the most part. When it comes to ordering parts for your service department, a lot of dealerships, I'd say it's 50-50. They get them to prepay, customer pay. But when it comes to warranty or, we call them WEOs, internal due bills, getting the customers back in to get them fixed, whose responsibility is it? And this is where, it's all over the map. Oh, the service writers, it's their responsibility. Oh, it's someone in the parts department is going to do it. And the follow up and and the ability, especially when you put it in the hands of the service department. In my experience, and this is both now and as a fixed ops director, it was my experience that service advisors are so dang busy, and they're worried about all the vehicles getting through the shop and what they got in front of them. Trying to rely on them to go back out and schedule customers to come back in, it doesn't work.
Well,
And that's
nowadays,
where,
so many
if you have a
dealerships have
BDC or
BDCs, so I feel
someone
like that's
special
kind of the logical
that can
thing to
do
do.
that, that's what you want to do. That's what worked for me. I actually, the service advisor's ability to schedule customers, I took that away from them as a fixed ops director, and I handed out to, we had two warranty clerks, and I put them in charge of it, and I actually paid them basically a bonus and a commission based on getting people back in. And they knew exactly what they could do. We trained them on how to schedule it, and that became one of their primary jobs, was getting focused on getting customers back in, whether they drove to their place with a rental car, which did happen a handful of times, or whatnot. Nothing made me happier, and I, in a way, I'm proud to say this, but maybe a little bit embarrassed. When I get a customer who would call up and go, quit calling me. I'll come in. I'll come in. That kind of killing them with communication to get them back in. Sometimes that's what it took. And that a lot of times is out of the parts manager's hands, where you're relying on the service department or service advisors to do that. In the parts end, a lot of times you might have someone in the parts department, a shipping and receiving clerk, who tries to do that, but it's not really a priority. It's just, hey, we got your part in, have a nice day. You leave a voice message and never hear from them again. So that if you can really focus on a good special order process and a follow-up, that goes a long way in starting to help inventory control and mismanaged inventories.
Okay, I like that. And what about, I feel like there's got to be some sort of stat or something with, how do you know you're ordering too many special orders? Or is there like if you're special ordering everything, aren't you not really relying on the DMS to stock what you actually need? Does that kind of happen or?
Well, with stock replenishment programs such as RIM and Arrow, whatever, you pretty much go, well, they're going to keep reordering everything that sells. I don't need to worry about the rest of it. And we know that's not true. There are parts that you are selling that aren't guaranteed. That's why whenever we go in and set up a GM or a Chrysler store, that happen to be on that, we try to educate them that you need to run a stock order still every day on the non-guaranteed parts, and it may only be a handful of parts, 2 or 3, but what we tend to see is it's more of a fire drill or a reaction that, oh, dang, we don't have this part. Why didn't it get replenished by, RIM? And only to find out, oh, it's not managed by RIM. And so then they throw it on a daily order to refill it, but in the interim, a customer was there, and so they either emergency purchase it or throw it on a CSO, and that's where, there still is a need to some degree to run a stock order on those non-guaranteed parts and look at some of your phase-ins, the parts that you are selling that the manufacturer isn't recommending, potentially carrying some of those parts. It happens every day at these stores, but, ASR programs have really lulled parts managers into, I don't really need to do a stock order. And that's just not true, so, and of course the special order process working properly helps determine if the manufacturer is going to guarantee it or not. So we have seen a lot of times where special orders are mismanaged. There's a lot of negative on hands and things like that. That's the type of thing that, focusing on the core of where your parts are coming from, basically special order demand, and taking care of that really helps a lot in watching the rest of the inventory.
Okay. And then I want to bring up to the last thing that I feel like we get a lot of when we're talking onboarding clients, especially ones that are on an ASR. For those that don't know, ASR is auto stock replenishment, because I've had people ask me, I want to make sure. There's that term that I feel like you adopted is the one-hit wonders, or maybe our parts managers have adopted it. How would you suggest a parts manager manage those one-hit wonders? Or can you define that a little bit more?
Well, what happens, and I'm preaching to the choir for the parts managers listening, is, and, with some of the manufacturers, and I won't name any, they post a lost sale on a part, and the next day it comes up for stocking policy approvals. And you sit there and scratch your head and go, I posted a lost sale on the fender, and remember, depending on the manufacturer, somewhere between 85 and 95%, they have to take 9 out of every 10 parts, and these one-hit wonders come up, and to remain compliant, to hit their incentives, they have to take them. I've explained that so many times to dealers where they go, why do I have so many guaranteed parts in my inventory with low sales? Well, depending on the manufacturer's demand criteria that they have for regional, national demand or whatever, they go, hey, on average, the dealers in your region are selling this part. And so you have to take it. So that's why some of the parts managers out there have shut down posting lost sales to parts. Because if they post a lost sale, it shows up as a demand with the manufacturer, and they treat it that way. So,
So are you recommending to do that, or what would you do to help minimize
well,
those?
you're asking me that question. I don't want to give personally, I wouldn't post any lost sales. Lost sales is one of those things. Manufacturers, sometimes certain manufacturers have put a lot of emphasis on lost sales. Others haven't. When we did a study on it about 16 years ago, what we found is that, remember, when you have a captive customer in front of you, like a technician or a customer standing in front of you at, the retail counter, which is a small portion of what anyone does anyway, but mainly a technician, you've got a captive customer. And more than likely, they're going to allow you to special order the part or go pick it up from another dealer if you happen to be in a metro and they're close, to do emergency purchasing or place it on a daily order. And, there's people out there who advocate post a lost sale because you didn't have it, and then you still special order or emergency purchase the part. Now, when you get that in, you'll actually record two demands for one true sale.
Yeah.
If you emergency purchase it from another dealer, there's your demand, right? But if you post a lost sale and purchase it on an emergency, now it's going to show up as two demands in the system, one lost sale, one true sale, when in reality it was one demand, okay? So that can tend to exaggerate your sales with lost sales. What we found out is that 90% of lost sales typically occurred, and I totally advocate this part, and agree with it. But what we found is 90% of most lost sales, especially in dealers in major areas, large metro areas, is different dealers were calling around and go, hey, can you check a part number and see if you got it? And of course, if you got a competition calling you for a part number, add it and post a lost sale. You're not getting it, but you weren't able to sell it to that dealer. I used to do it all the time. My competition is, hey, they got a demand on a part, post a lost sale. But when it came to how many times did a technician come to the counter and go, forget it, I don't want it, or the customer doesn't want it? Very, just rare that it actually happened. And the other 10% of it, and this is where I would say you post a lost sale too, now that we're talking this, and this is just the way demand works, is customers call up and say, hey, do you have a set of floor mats for my Toyota Camry? And you go, no, I don't. You give them a price and they go, well, let me call you back. You don't know if they're going to come in and order it or call back or whatever. Now you want to post a lost sale because you had a customer on the phone and they didn't, say, pick it up or order it for me, and give you a credit card or whatever. So that right there is one of the reasons in a ASR program that you want to be very careful about how you're posting lost sales. If you're over aggressive, the manufacturer is going to be over aggressive in suggesting parts.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of tricked you into lost sales going into that topic because they definitely do overlap, especially if you're on the ASR. So to simplify it, because again, this is a touchy, not a touchy topic, but it's one that you always say there's 10, 20 different ways to do lost sales. So I want to hear the Chuck Hartley way of lost sales simplified. What should a parts manager do? Just break it down.
I just told you.
I know, but I want you to simplify it now.
Simplified is if the customer is unsure and doesn't confirm it. In other words, if a technician comes up and requests a part and you don't have it,
That's a
you
lost
only
sale.
post a lost sale if he or she says forget it.
Okay.
Okay? If he or she say emergency purchase it or go ahead and special order it, don't post a lost sale because once you get the customer back in, you'll do that. There's been consultants out there who will say post a lost sale, and in fact, in some instances, let's say the customer doesn't come back in. Now you got the part sitting on your shelf. You didn't fulfill the sale for whatever reason. They didn't come back in or whatnot. You pulled it out of special orders and gave it a bin location. There's consultants who said post a lost sale. There was a demand. No, you never fulfilled the true demand for whatever reason. They didn't come back. It was ordered wrong or whatever. You're stuck with it. We call that for stock or unfulfilled demand. So in other words, and there's some aggressive people, Kaylee, they've said, when in doubt, post it out, post a lost sale. Terrible. Your customer demand tracks that. Again, if a customer calls on the phone or a dealer calls on the phone, of course you want to post that demand if they don't fulfill it and you don't have it. That's where I recommend lost sales are done. There's even dealers who go out and say, on average, or manufacturers have come and said, on average, every counter person should post at least 9 lost sales a day. And I crack up when I hear that because it depends on where you're working. If you're working the customer counter, you get very few people who come in. Most of the time, you're special ordering parts where you got it in stock. Technicians on the back counter, maybe there's those 9 times that you got to go pick it up or special order it every day. But again, you're either emergency purchasing or special ordering it. That fulfills the demand and takes care of it.
And you don't
If
have
a technician really walks away from the counter and says, forget it, I'll work around it, post a lost sale.
that makes sense.
But if a technician says, go pick it up or special order it, which they
Don't
typically,
post a lost sale.
don't post a lost sale. Never. So to simplify it, if you're going to fulfill the demand either through a special order or emergency purchase, never post a lost sale. And only if another dealer's checking your inventory, of course you want to add it and post a lost sale. Or if you get a customer on the phone who doesn't commit to it, post a lost sale.
Okay. I like
There's
that.
my simplified answer to lost sales.
And so we covered the common pitfalls of parts managers when it comes to inventory control, I guess ASR programs, and lost sales. So
Yeah.
thank you, Chuck.